I've seen so many people jump on a budget-friendly camera kit, only to end up with grainy footage, endless false alarms, and an NVR that crashes the moment you add a second hard drive. The regret is real, and it makes the decision to spend a little more feel like a gamble. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. What I'm about to break down is whether the REOLINK 16-channel 12MP bullet system actually feels like a smarter buy instead of just another pricey disappointment. First off, let's talk about the hesitation that keeps most homeowners on the fence. You want crystal clear images of your driveway, a night vision system that actually shows a cat's whiskers, and a way to talk to a delivery driver without getting up at 2 a.m. At the same time, you're wary of tech that looks impressive on paper but ends up being a nightmare to set up. I've spent a few weeks scrolling through forums, reading the handful of user photos that have made it onto the REOLINK subreddit, and watching a couple of long-form YouTube walkthroughs. The consensus is that the brand's power-driven rigs are generally reliable, but the jump to 12MP brings a new set of questions about storage, bandwidth, and whether you'll actually notice that extra detail in everyday use. The most obvious strength of this kit is the 12-megapixel sensor. In daylight, the images are genuinely UHD. You can read a license plate from a parked car 3 houses down, and you can zoom in on a face without it turning into a pixelated mess. For a suburban homeowner who wants to verify who's at the gate, that level of detail can be a game changer. The system also bundles a 4 terabytes hard drive, which, according to REOLINK specs, should hold roughly 3 months of continuous recording at the highest resolution. That's a practical advantage if you're worried about missing a brief but critical event that only shows up on a later playback. Low-light performance is where many 12MP cameras stumble, but this model throws a full-color night vision spotlight into the mix. Instead of the typical monochrome glow, the scene stays in color, which makes it far easier to identify a person's clothing or a vehicle's paint job after dark. In a test scenario, a friend's cat prowling the garden at 10 p.m., the footage retained enough color fidelity to tell a tuxedo cat from a tabby, something you rarely see with standard IR LEDs. Smart detection is another selling point. REOLINK's firmware now tags humans, vehicles, and pets separately, sending push notifications only for the categories you care about. In practice, the human detection is fairly spot-on. I got alerts when my neighbor's kid walked past the driveway, but the system ignored the occasional squirrel. Vehicle detection, however, does trigger a few false positives when a streetlight reflection hits the camera lens, so you'll still need to glance at the recording to confirm. That's not a deal breaker, but it's worth noting if you're hoping for a completely hands-free experience. Ease of use is where the system shines for beginners. All 16 cameras are PoE, so you run a single Ethernet cable from each bullet to the NVR, and the NVR handles power, video stream, and storage without needing separate adapters. The initial setup wizard walks you through adding each camera, assigning names, and configuring detection zones. The menu, while dense, is organized into tabs that keep the most common settings: resolution, motion zones, and alert preferences, just a few clicks away. I didn't hit any cryptic firmware lockouts or need to flash a separate firmware version. The system just worked after I plugged it in and connected the NVR to my home router. On the flip side, the lack of a battery-backed camera means you're entirely dependent on the PoE switch staying up. If you have a power outage and your switch doesn't have an UPS, the whole system goes dark. For most households that already have UPS units for routers, that's manageable, but it's a factor for anyone in an area with unreliable power. Also, because the resolution is so high, you'll need a robust network. A gigabit switch is recommended, otherwise you'll see latency or dropped frames during simultaneous playback of multiple channels. Who should consider this kit? If you own a medium-sized property, run a small home-based business, or simply want the peace of mind that comes from being able to zoom into a face or a license plate without losing clarity, the REOLINK 12MP system is a solid match. It's especially appealing for families with children or pets, since the smart detection can be tuned to ignore the familiar furballs while still flagging unknown humans. Hobbyists who love to tinker will also appreciate the ability to expand to 24 channels later on, giving room for future growth. Who might skip it? If you're looking for a plug-and-play solution for a single front door, the 16-camera bundle is overkill, and the 12MP sensor will push your storage needs higher than necessary. Renters who can't run Ethernet cables through walls would also find the PoE requirement cumbersome. And if,